heard Jen talk about the difference between a project and a product methodology. So as we kick off here, I want to hear from each of you to start. What is the most significant way in which adopting a product methodology has changed the way you work?
You want me to take this one first?
Yeah, you go first.
This one's really easy for me because I'm a marketing background person, not a technology background person. So it's really easy. It's been easy for me to live in the customer pains, user needs side of the world than, what's this process of building and designing a product that I create or spec out myself to the market. So it's one of the ways actually that Nerdery, with whom I have an active product in development now, has helped me a lot because I've been able to live in that zone of customer needs so much while they support and help guide the direction of the project itself.
Yeah, I had an emotional reaction because this is kind of part and parcel to my life. I mean, I am a recovered program manager, and I don't say that with any disrespect to the homies out there still doing that. But I think for me, early in my career, I found the soul-crushing qualities of certainty that really come to life in a pure waterfall environment. I found myself in situations where so often we would be so tied to completely unknowable and unreasonable certainty that it just put myself and a lot of people I work with through this meat grinder of, when's it going to be done? Is it too much? Is this thing? And then of course you'd end up with a bunch of garbage and people would be mad. And we spent more time pointing fingers. And it was sort of an epiphany for me, like when I first had the opportunity to accidentally fall into a situation where we could work in a more agile way and actually have a product mindset around, hey, let's learn quickly and let's actually adapt based on what we're learning. And, it almost was like a religious experience where it was like, I've got to tell everybody about this. This is great, And, obviously there's some degree of oversight and certainty we want to bring to our lives, but so often I think it leads us to bad decisions and low value. That a big part of my job, whether it was when I was working on product teams over the past, a handful of years working more with companies to help them to adopt a product model, really staying true to that notion that we usually have a low level of certainty about what's going to deliver value, so our ability to adapt to change, to listen to our customers is really vital. So it strikes a chord with me emotionally.
Yeah, I'll add on to something Neil said. That I've said to a few people is it feels like a more ethical way to approach the work. I've worked at places before where you would start a project and they would say, what's going to get out? 15% NPV over 3 years. I'm like, great, go through the project, here's $3 million. And nobody would ever check. Nobody really knew how you knew that. You would say it, and then you go. The one thing I do miss about Waterfall though is you finish, you head off, and have a party. And but if I was to say the downside though, sometimes part of we sort of touched on that already, is it's hard when you're working with business partners or other people who do still want that certainty. And when you do say, we're not sure yet, well, you should know. And sometimes that can get culturally really, really difficult. And I've had some really rough experiences where I haven't handled that well, and others where I have, or my team's handled it much better. So sometimes that can be weird. You feel like you're doing the right thing, but that can be just in itself to a lot of friction. If you think you're like the head of some company, you like to be able to say, well, this is. So that's sometimes tricky to navigate.
For me, having a product mindset was the most collaborative way to work. What I mean by that is, even though I'm in charge of uncovering the consumer need, the need is only useful if you act on it, if you do something about it. And what product mindset tells you is that we start with the need, but it's the minds of the strategy team, the product team, the development team, all the different people working together to make that a reality for the customer. What I also changed my thinking was that it's a consistent process of learning and learning that makes the product process so much more interesting. Then you start with something and you end with something, right? So, of course, there's a start and end to it, but the discipline that comes with learning about something, implementing it, testing it, having a collaborative approach to solve the problem, it can't be done in any other process, you know.
Awesome. I'm excited to pull on some of those threads throughout the rest of this discussion. Thanks for kicking us off. The first step with anything that we see is first starting with research and insights. So that means determining, as Samir said, what is the problem that we're solving for? What is the pain point? Who is our user, and do we truly understand them? So Neil, I'm going to have you start. What's something that you've noticed about the way that users are engaging with digital products today that's changed over the years, and what insights have you gleaned as you observe those trends?
So just to put this back, you said what new ways are air conditioning and stuff, consumers engaging with that?
Yeah. How are folks engaging with digital products in their lives today that's different from how they used to?
Oh, yeah. I mean, probably no secret to anybody here, but like, I think back to 10-ish years ago, I don't know, I'm trying to remember when it was exactly. I think it was around 2009 or 10 when I was at Target and we started the first mobile teams. And we were all thinking like, well, you know, we're pretty sure people are going to be confident to buy things on this, and we think there's probably an opportunity to, here, I'll put that up back. Hello. Damn, you got the good one. And you know, we were like really skeptical about how far this Target app would go at the time. You know, we're like, well, you know, and a lot of people were like, maybe it's a marketing vehicle, and you know, we were trying to be like, hey, you know, I think we can sell stuff through here. And, you know, you fast forward to 2022 and you think about the differences. Like, nobody would ever question in buying things from your phone. Hell, I'm buying things from anything that talks to me that's connected to the internet now. And I think our expectations are that we should be able to meet all of our needs in any way we want with any form of technology. And that certainly wasn't the case not that long ago. And I think the pandemic has also changed my expectations and the expectations of a lot of people, because not only do I expect to be able to buy products, order food, get what I want, but now I'm expecting that I should always be able to do that at home. I even think about like pre-pandemic, I would like once in a while order food delivery. Now it's like, any day of the week, if like Bite Squad or DoorDash is not there, there's not enough customer service to follow up, like, what, we the dark ages, like what the heck is going on? So I think, from my perspective, the expectations of making things available real time in any digital touch point is just the norm. And then it's all the gnarly bits to actually instrument that, operationalize it through the companies supporting it.
Can I add something to that? As Neil was just making me think of. So it's also, to add on to what you were saying, it's easy. It's like really friction free. And I was thinking back years and years and years ago to when I started in tech. Remember those, like, anybody who's old as me, like those big Microsoft Word manual books? Like it would come with that or Microsoft Access. You never have that now, right? And you expect a thing on your phone to just work. And it's just easy, or maybe there's some help text that pops up as you go. And that's the piece that having really great UX partners with your team and really thinking about building in feedback measures to say, well, how are people working through using this application, like touch points, and having really good metrics for what's working and what's not. And watching those is, you know, I talked about in the bio, user happiness being one of the metrics I really like to think about. Having that kind of feedback too really helps, because kind of the final piece of your point, there's so many choices, right? And if you don't make your thing friction free, even if it's an internal tool for internal users, that's going to be a thing you're going to hear about, and you should. So thinking about that part is important.
Absolutely. Samira, you have a lot of experience identifying successful ways to gather these insights about our users. So what mistakes have you seen companies make in their journey to understand their customers' needs?
Oh my God. I wouldn't say mistake. I think sometimes what happens is you think you know everything about the end user. You know, some of the projects I've been in, it's a mature business. they have a physical product, they want to create a digital experience. I know the consumer. I think I can do this without any kind of foundational information from the user. And when you skip that, you're taking the consumer for granted. You're not even allowing the consumer to evolve and experience and express their point of view on how they have evolved in the journey of associating with you. So when you start a process with hypotheses and this assumption that I know enough more than the consumer, you always fail at some point. Because at some point, you don't have an anchor to compare your decisions to. And that is what I've typically seen is we know enough, let's get started. And sometimes it's just good to pause and reflect and assess, do we know everything? Are there things that would be good to know right now before we embark on that journey? So that we're not questioning the idea, we're not questioning the intent when we're really trying to make a decision. I think that is where we have really made a mistake or a misstep.
Yeah, and to add to that a little bit is it's easy to think that you know your existing users, and a lot of times we forget about the potential users who don't use our product already, right? Because that's where a lot of times the biggest opportunity lies is the people who haven't even considered or had access or been drawn to the solution that you have today for some pain point or some reason that you don't know. And you don't know anything about what motivates those people.
What we're discussing here is to how to ensure that our product is desirable to end users, right? But we also know it's just important to ensure that we understand the market viability for it. So Ryan, I'm going to turn to you as your perspective of someone building the products today. What do you think is the right balance between focusing on what drives the business versus what attracts users as you're deciding where to invest your time or your money?
Yeah, maybe I got ahead a little bit with the addition that I made to your comment. But this has been one of our big challenges, if you will, as we can really easily understand our existing collector base. And we intentionally refer to our consumers as collectors instead of customers because we feel like it makes them more human. So it's easy to understand their pains and their needs and their desires a little bit more than if they're just a metric. As a customer or a user are really metric terms. And so we felt like we had a great knowledge of our existing collector base, but that didn't really justify our project when we were evaluating what the potential return on this investment is. And it wasn't until we reached beyond that, expanded to who are the people who aren't doing business with us today, engaging in our community today, and really start to dig into that opportunity that the project really started to make sense.
I think that's great input and perspective. Andrew, I'm going to turn to you to see if you have any advice for product owners like Ryan as they're trying to satisfy stakeholders on one hand and delight users on the other. How do you balance between those two?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, as I was thinking about this, I would hope that the stakeholders also really care about the success of the users. And so if you're seeing those, I mean, firstly, I love that you talk about them as collectors, because that's like persona thinking, and that's really cool. Yeah, but I hope the stakeholders and the users' goals are reasonably aligned. And if they're not, then that's a weird problem to solve. And there's a way to be thinking about, well, what's the business case? Because then I think that then your business case isn't really going to work. That, to me, that's a good sign about do you have a decent business case or not, if there's a big difference there. And even actually start to jump in, would your stakeholders be users? And would they care about the product if they were users? That's probably a good sign too.
I had to jump in because this makes me think of the beauty of corporate America. And so you think about products that you're doing as a big corporation. So I worked at Best Buy, I worked at Target before then, and I think of the friction between, as a product manager, really wanting to do things that you know from, Target they would say guests, and Best Buy would say customers, but we try to think about who they are. But nonetheless, as a product manager, you have all this passion about these opportunities you see based on what you know to be one might say like the jobs to be done of the people, the things that they're actually trying to accomplish. And there's that friction, I think, in corporate America when you're working on products against, stakeholders being, at their most archaic, the business within the company, maybe in a more progressive sense, your partners who might have operational or merchandising or marketing agendas that they have to satisfy. And that's, I think, a constant struggle in the corporate sort of product environment. We've been spending a lot of cycles trying to balance how do we satisfy sort of enterprise tops-down strategic initiatives while not losing sight of how to actually meet the needs of the customers. One would think that those are always well aligned, but when you're moving to Titanic and you're thinking about some of these large efforts, it can be hard to strike that balance. And I think trying to find ways to have conversations and data points around customer satisfaction beyond like lagging indicators of NPS, ways to show behavior that you can correlate to the impact that relates to that strategy. I think those are tactics that are easier said than done, but trying to keep that balance is really hard in corporate America, I think. Probably corporate any country for that matter.
Absolutely. I think if we understand the desirability and we validate viability, right, we also need to think about layering and feasibility and how do we actually produce this thing. So what technologies are going to support the capabilities of the determine that we need? How do we support this thing in-house with the resources that we have? So Neil, can I go back to you? Having as much insight and research as possible is going to help us to inform and drive development, but I want to sort of talk about how do we layer in feasibility into the ideation and innovation stage as we're trying to think about the best way to solve these problems for our users. So how do we go from the ideal state ideating into actually thinking about creating tangible outcomes?
Yeah. And, I'm always, just given the gigs that I have, I'm always going to think about this and like, how does this show up in a big company? And so feasibility, sometimes I think about like, can we build it? Can we support it? Kind of mindset. And, I think one of the challenges I've experienced in my career has been oftentimes back to that old problematic level of certainty. We try to over guess and prescribe what it's going to take to do something. And oftentimes the technology needed, operational support needed is more emergent than we anticipate. So we spend all this time trying to come up with these beautiful plans of this is how we're going to do it, this is how we're going to sustain it. And usually my experience we're wrong, and the more tied we are to some predisposed notion of this is what this is going to be and we're investing in this technology, the more we can get stuck. I mean, at Target, one of my most impactful experiences was going from a thing that was this 400-person program that was predicated on this concept that customers would really love to have social conversations about savings on Facebook. Like, people are going to just love that. That's going to be just so valuable. And at the time, Facebook was about to IPO, so they were trying to make money and they were trying to pitch big retailers on stuff. And we had all these notions like, okay, we're gonna build this social savings application in this way, and we had people all over the world, and we had just back to soul crushing. You would have these early morning breakdowns of 4 million requirements and all these things with high certainty we're going to do, and boy, we're going to operationalize this. And they ended up blowing the whole thing up, and they took like 40 people in a room. And we got something out in the market, and we found out within like a couple months, like, nobody cared about socially saving on Facebook. But what we discovered is, well, people actually loved the ability to scan something in a store and get savings, and that actually solved other problems that we were trying to figure out, and it gave us a venue to still monetize some of these deals. And everything we ended up building was so much different, and the way we operationalized supporting that was so much different from what the 400-person death march had been 8 months leading up to it, both from a technology, people management, and operational perspective, that had we not had the opportunity to sort of break with that false certainty and reset, we wouldn't have sustained what has now become something that that company has continued to evolve and has been a source of revenue, as well as one of their more successful mechanisms for tying digital behavior into store sales. So, what we thought would be feasible and how we thought it would support it very different.
You queued up my next question perfectly, because I want to talk about, we're starting to build it, right? Andrew, I was going to go to you with this next one. We're running full steam ahead, but how do we check ourselves as we're running to ensure that we're not running full steam ahead in the wrong direction?
Yeah, there were so many cool things I was hearing and thinking about jumping in. So a couple of things. One is having a plan and vision is awesome, right? And a mantra, I can't remember where I saw it first, was dreaming years, planning months, delivering days. And so it's great to have a dream, it's fine, right? But the plan and months thing comes down to how you think about your personas and who you're solving a problem for, but also what are the outcomes you're driving. And some you or Neil say leading indicators. So sometimes you can have a thing where look, there's a really long-term goal, and maybe we're going to make this much money for reducing returns on retail, right? That takes ages, right? It could be like 4 months or 6 months until you see what it return. So thinking about really quick outcomes and faster things that you can track is good. And that's where the delivering days piece comes. So can I give another target example? That was that. So I was really lucky to be involved in a team that worked on target restock. And that was quite a while ago. It was Target falling off Amazon Pantry, like the big box thing. And we were like, well, we've got an hypothesis. This could be good for Target, but we're not sure. So let's just get a team. And by the way, that's really important because it was a team not just of product people, but UX and engineers who were super motivated and really understood the problem and really thought about stuff. It's where you come to feasibility because the product people don't have to be the answers for feasibility. Very often the engineers, that's their job, is to be creative and think about ways to say, well, we could reuse this technology and this stuff. They reuse loads of stuff in the store, we didn't need to build it. We reuse loads of stuff on the website, we didn't need to build anything, we just rejigged a few things to test our hypothesis. And we have plans to say, let's do a small launch just to employees, team members in Twin Cities, run some stuff, ask them. One of the things my team did was to ask them to do surveys and take pictures of the boxes when they arrive, so that we could really see very quickly what kinds of signals are we getting. Would you do this again? What was the pre-order experience, post-order? So we had some very quick feedback stuff. I think I'm still answering the question you guys. But it was a really quick feedback thing that we could do to say, are we doing the right thing here? Are we ready to go to the next phase? If we aren't, great. If we're not, humility is a really important piece of a product manager, right? To say, I might be wrong, but I've got a good way to see, am I wrong or am I not? Should I be going in the right direction? I love the thing of reusing what you've already found to try something else. Exactly what the Apple Watch people did. So, hopefully that answers the question.
Absolutely. Samir, can you build on maybe what methods can we use to gather feedback as we're building from our users?
If I may, I might just add, and I'm not a technical strategist, but I just want to brag about the process we follow at Nerdery a little bit. Because we have such a collaborative process, and I hope you can attest to that, is when you're thinking about the technical strategy, it's not an afterthought, right? They're not waiting to think about the technical strategy while the research is going on. Because it's a highly collaborative process, all teams are working in sync to say, okay, that's the consumer need, and here's the experience we want to create. What's it going to take? And so that early feasibility assessment phase is invaluable. And we do that at Nerdery, so just bragging points. Speaking of keeping a test, I think the beauty of the product mindset process is that you're continuously testing and learning. So some of the methodologies which you all might be aware of are usability testing that we do. Really, again, working really closely with the product managers, the technical people, the design folks, all working in hand to see what is the bit we're trying to test here. The experience, is it validating the feature? Is it really thinking holistically in terms of the product experience when we use it, when we're launching it? So it's a continuous process, and there are several methods that we employ to make sure that we're consistently meeting consumer expectations throughout the entire process of product development. Yeah.
I'm going to distill down to some final thoughts here with one last question that I get quite often. We discussed a lot of the ideal state initiatives here, how we want things to work in the best case scenario, but we all know that there's a journey to getting full buy-in on leveraging this product mentality within companies today. So for product owners that are making that cultural shift, when still we stick to a traditional budget or a timeline, Andrew, you addressed this a little bit in your initial question. For any of you that really have insight into this, how do we work within those constraints? But we still have to get approval from the board, we still have to adhere to, we're gonna deliver this by this time, when we're trying to make that shift to using product mentality.
Well, oh man, this mic is so hot, I'm used to it. But, it's gonna sound pretty cliche, but I do think trying to be really consistent about talking about the outcomes and trying to bring things back to the person that you are serving, the user, the guest at Target, the collector. I think that, again, like I said, in my corporate gigs, there's always plenty of healthy constraint to focus us. And a lot of the traditional expectations of delivery, I think, are alive and well in a lot of the spaces that I support. And yet, if we can help to bring to the surface more critical thinking, if we can demonstrate how we can use data to adapt our choices, and again, really tie it back to what are we serving, it can help to move the needle. And change is hard. Changing how you operate at scale is hard, and I think persistence and really being true to those values of, we're here to adapt and change based on the signals, and let's show you how that works, is one thing.
So I keep adding things and stuff, but a couple of things to add. I love that you talked about outcomes and being able to say we think that at this time we should get these signals that tell us it's not working. A couple of other things to think about. I've had projects where initiatives where I've really struggled to work with partners because I've been on my team and been like, oh, we're doing this product thing, this is the thing. And I've gone in as kind of probably arrogant theory person, actual principle, blah 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 says this, and people are like, you don't even know what you're talking about. So something that I really like is as product people, we should be really learning about our users or our stakeholders and understanding their world. Something I learned a while ago was to actually bring them into our world as well. So if you're doing a training class in product stuff, even if it's story mapping or doing research, competitor research or whatever, bring some user partners in with you or some stakeholder partners too, because that then gets them makes them feel like they've got a part of the thing as well. And it's super cool when they start to say, oh, how are the OKRs, or how are we doing against this, or can we come to these sprint demos and sprint reviews? That's great, and make sure that they're in the demos, make sure they're in the reviews. And as soon as they start to see that delivering days or delivering sprints, they'll start talking to their bosses, and people will start. I've seen it again and again, where people are like, oh yeah, we get this now, we see it. It can get really hard as product people if you're trying to deliver and you're trying to change the culture as well. It's really tricky.
I may add, I think one of the other aspects of product mindset is transparency. And many times, we hesitate to be completely transparent with external stakeholders with the fear that my budget might get cut. But if we're not transparent, I think what we lose out sometimes is the amount of hard work the product teams really put in to really show how they're staying true to the customer need. And they're following the process, they're trying to meet deadlines. So I love the idea of bringing stakeholders in the conversation. Another thing that, in the spirit of transparency, what we used to do is really have the stakeholders involved early on. So not just the executive review, but even the first presentation that you have after you finish your research or comparative analysis, and make it a truly immersive experience when you're providing that presentation. Don't just stick to slides, bring in a panel of consumers, bring in an existing product that you're trying to emulate, showcase a competitor who's doing a great job in providing that similar experience. I think once they start immersing themselves in the hard work the team has put in, it I think gives them a completely different perspective. Being a product owner myself in my past life, I used to get really caught up with, no, this executive has 20 minutes, we have 3 slides to do. And I think sometimes you're like, well, does it really need a slide? I'm going to show them a consumer interview video, and that will capture the same points, right? So I think just being creative as a product owner or a product lead, how you want to present your information in the spirit of transparency. I think sometimes.
I love the transparency piece.
Yeah.
Some of the folks here who I was lucky enough to work with at Best Buy, we would do like a monthly, we call it scorecards, not a great name, but basically an update on here's our product vision and all of our OKRs. But we'd always put a section at the end to say what didn't work this month and what did we learn. And it started out really great as a team because people would start to share really transparently and drove really, really great conversation, team building and trust. But then the team would take that to their user partners and be like, look, this is the thing. Another thing you said was bringing people in from the start. We had a project where a new product where the team brought the users in to say, we've got 6 different names. What names do you like the best? And even just that really basic thing really helped people feel like it was their thing and they were part of it.
Yeah, one piece that I would add is sometimes you have to put yourself in my shoes, which is the person who actually has to sign the check, right? Like I get the torturous side, of both sides of this. But I think it's a really good point is if you own a product and you're not the person that's signing the check, would you sign the check? Right? I mean, because at the end of the day, that's the struggle. That's the pitch that you have to make. That's the support that you have to rally is would you sign the check if it was your name on the dotted line?